You're listening to Tapestry, a podcast by a music lover for music lovers. I'm your host, Kelly. Music is a thread that weaves a course throughout our lives. Join me on a journey to unravel that thread and bring you the stories behind what inspires musicians to create. Side note, Tapestry is an uncensored podcast. Don't say I didn't warn you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 62 of Tapestry. Today's guest is Taylor Batory, who very recently just became a Canadian citizen, was formerly living in Michigan, and he joined me to discuss all sorts of things about his audio production career and his musical upbringing. We discussed things like writing musical homages to existing media, changing technology and his hands-on experience as a music major in college, and on how a high school photo inspired an entire comedic pirate-themed album. Here is a little bit of his track, Sway. All you've let go. Taylor Batory, thank you for being here. You are now technically in another country from me, so this has automatically upgraded this to an international interview status.
Am I really the first one to be an international guest?
Oh no, but I just feel like it's fun to.
Oh yeah, you had Gareth. That's right.
Yeah, I've had a handful of European folks over the years. It's been kind of fun, but yeah, so you're now technically Canadian.
Yeah.
Canada, and
I still got to learn the rest of the national anthem. I haven't gotten past "O Canada," but you know, one step at a time. You're fresh. You're fresh on Canadian soil. But yeah, at the time that we had this interview set up, you were an American living in Michigan. I know you have had a lot of changes going on in your life, but I typically like to start by letting you explain who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your musical history. So why don't you go ahead and start with that? Sure. So my name is Taylor Batory, and I am a guitar player, composer, mixing engineer, recording engineer guy I originally hail from Michigan, but as you said, I just moved to Canada recently. I've been playing guitar for, I think, 16, going on 17 years, I believe. Don't let that number impress you. I feel like I'm an average guitar player at best, but I primarily kind of do my own solo projects. I operate under the name TB Project, not the most original name, but gets the job done. And then I have a home studio business called TB Audio, which it's like the least business-like business ever, because I don't really actively seek out clients, but if it were more of a regular thing, I try to make it more of a regular thing. But I have had a couple of client projects that I've done some recording and playing and mixing on. Mostly I just kind of compose my own music, write it, record it, and perform on it and all that, and then hopefully try to find the right audience for it online somewhere, I am a Wayne State University graduate, and I studied music there, so I kind of know what I'm doing sometimes, but it's one of those things where you learn all the rules and then you just ignore them after the fact kind of thing,
Right.
But yeah, it's mostly just like, for me, music is mostly just like, it's always been an independent venture for the most part, where I write and record everything. I've been in like a couple of bands in my life, but none of them were ever very serious, It was kind of like the high school band type thing. And then a few years ago, I was in a group, and all we ever really did was rehearse and jam a couple of times, but I just, chemistry wasn't really there for me personally. But so it's mostly been a solo venture, and, be nice if I could get it to change, but I think I'm too much of a hard ass to deal with other people.
Well, that's a good place to start. Because I became aware of you through like many of my other interviews and interests through the Prague Discord, but and some other related things. But I find that there's a lot of traction for solo artists thanks to the era we live in. Like you can hop on Discord and find people to collaborate and do stuff with your project. If you don't, know how to do Mongolian throat singing or play accordion, you just go online, find someone who can do that, and suddenly they add the perfect element to your project. Was that like part of the reason that you maybe wanted to continue going in that solo realm?
I think part of it was, or like the big thing for me was just like logistically where I was at, like in the world. Like I lived kind of like in this Hobunk town, like, kind of outside of the greater Metro Detroit area. And it's just kind of like, believe it or not, it might be hard to believe, but there's not a lot of prog musicians in Detroit. And just like, also like in the little Hobunk towns, there's not a lot of them. So I think trying to find like-minded people was a hard thing, but also I think, because I had dealt with the band stuff before, and I think that, there was enough drama there for me to just kind of want to, I felt more comfortable just doing my own thing, more so than like actively trying to seek out a band. And I think also is like, when I started going to college, I'm like, I don't have time to devote to band practices every weekend or whatever. Cause, I'd still had like, I would work at my job every weekend. So it's like, I didn't really have time for it. So, I don't know. I think, I've always just kind of had like, a knack for being able to kind of hone in on what I wanted to do and what my so-called grand vision was for the stuff that I was working on. So, I kind of wanted to be that guy that does it all, so it helped me kind of cultivate my own skills as far as like recording and producing have gone. And I'm still learning about that stuff every day, but I feel like, that's something that I wanted to like really tackle myself and cultivate,
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say if you have a business around it, you probably at least have a good idea of what you're doing, but that obviously comes from lots of failures and lots of trying different things. So
and the business side of it was kind of like, I had started it kind of originally as like it's mostly a side hustle sort of thing, but like it was I used to work at this post-production studio in Michigan, and they did a lot of audio work for advertisements. So like you'd get like a lot of voiceover work for like, Dodge, Ram, and like a lot of those car like manufacturers, Ford, and then a whole bunch of other. It was kind of it was a cushy job, but I hated it because it was so boring. It wasn't really much to do because I was an audio assistant there, so I kind of just wrote down take times and organized files, data entry, that sort of thing. There was the odd like celebrity person that they would get on there every once in a while. So it was kind of cool. You'd hear like Sam Elliott live in the studio. Like he wasn't physically there.
Yeah.
But you would hear him like doing the lines. And then I think Will Arnett did a couple things. Tim Allen did some stuff. But anyway, that's a long diatribe for me to just say that I started the business as a means of kind of like, if they were writing my paychecks to my business, it was kind of be like, I don't know, it's like for tax purposes or something like that.
Oh, like you go, hey, I have an LLC and I'm a legitimate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And from there, I did get a little bit of client work. Like I used to teach at there's a local, like a family run music store near where I live called KO, and it's run by two brothers, and they're the coolest dudes around. And I used to teach there for guitar there for a little bit. And some of the teachers there, I was kind of familiar with them and kind of had been around them for a little while. And some of the teachers there wanted some music recorded. So the only two client albums that I've done are from teachers at KO Music. So,
okay.
And that was kind of like, my little like trip into like being that kind of, business model of like, having people come in, helping them arrange their songs, record them, and then master them for release and all that. So none of it's like huge or anything like that. Like the ones like a jazz fusion album, which I'm actually pretty proud of that one. I think I did, I I played drums on the whole thing, and then I did some guitar, I think, and some bass. And then it's kind of the same thing. The other one is like a gospel sort of album type thing. A little outside of my wheelhouse, but, I wanted to try something a little bit different just to try it out,
So on both of those albums, I want to make sure I understand what you said correctly. You also were a session musician for part of it too?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, because so the jazz album, I'm actually working with he's my buddy. His name is Scott Arnold, and he's like, I think he's like in his mid 60s, and he's like, I had these like jazz fusion-y type ideas filed away for a long time and never had a means of like writing them down or like producing them. So when he finally got in touch with me, he had like these songs kind of figured out roughly. So I helped him with arrangement on a couple of them, and I'm like, here's what we can kind of do to kind of have it make sense. It's mostly instrumental stuff. And I let him handle pretty much all the guitar stuff because he knows how his songs go. And then he did, I think, a lot of the bass too, but he needed a drummer. And I'm like, I can play drums. I've got a drum set. I've got some mics. Let's do it. So all the drums on the jazz album I did. And then I think the gospel album too, I did a little bit of guitar, bass, drum. I don't remember what I did on it, but I offer that kind of like in tandem with the rest of like the recording and all of that. I'm like, if you want me to record these things for you, then, let's figure out an arrangement. I can help you do it.
I think that's pretty impressive. I mean, like speaking from someone who works in manufacturing, I think that's a big value where customers can come to you knowing, hey, we literally make everything under this one roof. We, we sell you the product. We get your credit card number to pay for the product. We literally make it next door. I check the work. It goes out the door from the same place. Yeah. I think that's a huge value to be able to say, not only can I make your stuff sound good, but I can do that with what my fingers and my brain and my instruments are doing. So I think most people are like, I'm either a session musician or I'm a mixer master, not both.
Yeah. And it's, and that's kind of where I'm at with the business side of things as far as like my LLC goes, is like, logistically right now it's a little like tough because I'm trying to get back to be with my client Scott to work on some stuff, but obviously the border's been kind of causing some issues, and I think they're supposed to be loosening it up pretty soon. So I'm hoping to get back in touch with him. But something that I wanted to try to get more into a little bit, time permitting, is that to work on stuff remotely, where if people were to send me stems or whatever, to be able to mix it and master it for them, if that, were something that somebody was interested in. Problem is, I'm just terrible at marketing myself. Like, it's just not something that I'm very adept at. So I think kind of deep down, like for me personally, I value more of the time that I can spend working on my own personal projects as opposed to trying to make money doing other people's projects, Not that I don't care about other people's projects, but it's just like I'm more in it for the stuff that I want to make and create and that sort of thing,
Well, when I went to your Bandcamp, actually, one of the things that caught my eye was that Space-like EP you must have finished. This is at the beginning of last year at this point. Yeah. But you had a little blurb there that said, "This collection of songs is my way of documenting my college career. The first track got you into the music program. The second track connected you to a network of great musicians. And the last track got you your diploma." Mm-hmm. So it kind of seems to me like the networking side of it and just like making organic connections from people you run into or people you study with, that seems to come naturally to you. But I understand the frustration of like, how do you reach outside of that, Yeah. Did you feel that making that EP was a very challenging process for you? Like, what lessons did you learn through that?
The EP kind of came together by, I don't want to say happenstance, that's not the right word, but like it was kind of just an amalgamation of songs that I had written over time. And I like to find a place for songs. Like, maybe I'm old fashioned, but like, I just don't really dig on the idea of single releases.
Same.
Yeah, like for certain artists, I can get it. Like if you're doing like a Queen David Bowie collab and you want to make a song, then go for it, But typically, I like to kind of have a home for each song that I write, So the 3 songs on that EP were kind of just songs that were ran, like, I should say randomly, but they were written at different times kind of during my, musical career. So like Lunar Shadows is the opening track. That's the first song I ever wrote, actually. Yeah, I know it's a 10-minute song. It's the first song I ever wrote. So that one, it was actually written back in like 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. Yeah, I'd gotten my first 7th string and I'm like, hell yeah, dude, I could play E flat without having to tune down, So yeah, that was the first song I ever wrote, and it went through a couple of different iterations before it ended up being on the album. I think I rewrote all the lyrics and everything after a while. But that was actually a piece that I had a demo version recording of it. I think I did it in like GarageBand or something like that, or maybe Logic. I forget what. But in order to get into the music program at Wayne State, you have to go through an audition process. And and like any college, you have to audition in one of 2 styles, either jazz or classical.
Naturally.
Yeah. And I'm not a classically inclined person. Sorry, just not. So I'm like, I like jazz a little bit, so I'll audition for jazz. And that was a very tumultuous process. It took me 3 times to audition to get into the program.
Good for you, though, for sticking with it.
I had to take a semester off and take private lessons with one of the teachers there to learn how to play jazz. So that's what I ended up doing. But then aside from that, though, but they had a music tech program. So what I ended up doing is like, along with my audition, like my physical audition of going in and playing the jazz tunes and sight reading and all that, I submitted my demo for Lunar Shadows to the music tech department. And I think that's something that kind of helped push me through to pass the audition. Because he kind of saw that, like, here's this kid who's got this, I think at the time it was like an 8.5-minute version. Not that it really matters, but it's like, there was a couple of things that I ended up adding to it after the fact. But, he saw that and he's like, all right, like this is kind of something that I think that he can learn more about, Mm-hmm. So that's why I say that song got me into the program, because it kind of did. And then the second track, as part of that like music tech program, there was a recording techniques class where you're given access to the music studio at the college. And if you book time, you can pretty much do whatever you want. So as I've stated before, I'm more of the lone wolf kind of guy where I do everything myself. So I wanted to compose a song specifically for other people to perform it, and I can kind of play the role of the recording engineer.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, given that I believe that's the track that has like xylophone, cello,
yes,
choirs, and like everything on there.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of different musical instruments on there, and everything on that song is live. It's an actual person playing it. I think with the exception of the electric piano, like it's a MIDI piano, but somebody performed it. But it's like every other thing was mic'd up and, recorded in the studio. So I recruited a bunch of my classmates to record, and they played, there was piano, violin, cello, xylophone, vibraphone, drums, and then the vocalist, I think. And I tried to line up a guitar player and a bass player, but they kept bailing on me. So I still ended up playing guitar and bass on it in the class version. But the rest of it, was done by live musicians. So, and I ended up redoing a bunch of stuff for the Space-like release again. I wasn't really too pumped about the way the drummer played it originally. He was kind of, he couldn't really play anything that wasn't 4/4. So, and there's a couple parts that are in 7 and 9 in there.
Yeah.
So, which I get it, like that's just kind of my thing, is like being able to kind of play in these weird meters and stuff. So, but there's some parts in that song. The song "Sway" is what it's called.
Well, I wonder how that guy did in the jazz. In the jazz audition.
He's all right as a jazz. He was an all right jazz player, but I think he kind of came more from a rock foundation like myself. So like, I think he was kind of more rooted in that sort of playing. So I think I worked with him on one other song. Actually, yeah. So the last song is called Illusions on the album. And that one, my bachelor's project, my final project for my degree was I decided to make a documentary about recording the song Illusions. So, which you can find on YouTube. I think it's on my YouTube channel, and I don't know. it's certainly dated, but like, you know, I had the Amish beard kind of going on. I didn't have the goatee thing happening yet, so I look like an Amish person. And then, like, I don't know, I watch it now and I'm like, I did not know how to color balance a camera, and I did not know how to record audio or anything.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated college in 2016. So
okay,
yeah, it took me a little while longer to get it because I think I started college proper, I think, in 2010. But then I had transferred from one school to another, and then I took that semester off for the audition, and then I changed my major like at the end of the program that I was already in. So it's like, you know.
Were you in a music-based major before, or did you just like specify it for what you wanted?
No, I was in. I think my first year or two I was undecided, and then I finally settled into the music tech program, but toward the end of the music tech program, they required you to do a lot of like computer programming and things like that. And I wasn't into it. And I think what ended up happening was I talked to somebody else who was like, I think she was in the music tech program, and then she ended up switching out. But I had a conversation with her and a fellow student, and she, I think, changed it to like media arts or something, which was kind of more based in like film and video production. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm more interested in. Like music tech is one thing, but like the video aspect of it is also something that I thought was interesting. So I ended up doing a minor in media arts and then just a bachelor of arts in music. So, you know, through that, I was able to kind of do some like film courses, and like there was a video production class where I made a short film, which I think is floating around on YouTube as well, and it's really stupid. But it's like, you know, and I'm not like the top tier, like amazing video editor or filmographer or anything like that, because I realize how much work that goes into it, but it's just like, I still edit videos quite a bit, and it's just like something that interested me more, I think, than kind of what the music tech program initially is like designed to be focused on, where it's like, I don't know where the computer programming part of it really fit in for me, because I've heard from other students at the time that they would go into the computer programming class and the teacher would just give them automatic A's because they know they're from the music program. But the people who are in the robotics, you know, focused majors or whatever, they're the ones who've got to focus and actually learn the stuff. But it's like, so even the professors knew that it was kind of a write-off sort of class. So I'm like, you know, I don't want to deal with that.
That's so strange that we're talking about this. I just was saying to my boyfriend 2 days ago how I find it interesting that colleges will sometimes take that, you know, we want you to be well-rounded kind of idea almost to this severe degree, like to the point that you're hurting the student's chance of success. Like, yeah, like it's good maybe for a business major or an arts major or a psychology major to take an anthropology class or an ethics class or art history. That's fine. But I'm like, some of these colleges, they just throw this stuff at you out of left field. Like I felt similar when I had to take a web design class because I was a graphic design major, and I'm like, this is going to be the class that lowers my GPA. Like I just couldn't speak that language. I couldn't do it, and I thought, this is so cruel. So
yeah, and I've told people like before, like my nephew, it's crazy. He's already graduated from college too. He's not that much younger than I am, but I remember telling him as soon as he like enrolled in college in his freshman year, I'm like, you're going to hate college right out the gate because it's exactly like high school for like the first year or two. It's the same thing. You're doing the same courses. I remember like in my like, you know, I guess it would be considered your sophomore year, but I kind of lose count after I went to college for 6 years. But I remember taking like a biology class. I'm like, I remember this from high school. Like, why do I need to take this? You know? And yeah, I don't know. That's a whole other can of worms to talk about the education system in the United States. But I mean, it's like, I understand the well-roundedness to a point, but it's like, I feel like, you know, you can hone that down or narrow it down to just like a few topics of choice, like, I don't know, political science, I think is a decently interesting thing, or like a useful thing to kind of know about, or like, I don't know, like it's the same thing. Like, I don't know, like with high school, like you should be able to teach the kids how to do their taxes and things that are practical, you know?
Right. Yeah. Teach them how to balance a checkbook, how to go to a bank and ask for certain things, how to apply for your voter registration card, how to do all that stuff that I wish more people knew, but that's fair. Well, I think also you represent, maybe this kind of growing group of people who similar age range, you're totally content to go teach yourself how to do something, or, whether it's through college or you take a community college class, at the end of the day, you want to compose, you want to write music. So you're going to do something that helps you achieve that goal, whether it's traditional education or not. Do you kind of, I guess, see that trend growing, or, what's your thought on that?
I think, what's become kind of like increasingly apparent, at least in North America, or the United States even more specifically, is kind of like I hate to put it so bluntly, but it's like the scam that is college education. It really is kind of like just there just to get people's money, I feel, and that's not to say that there's no value in college or university level education. There certainly is. I feel like, a lot of the stuff that I learned in music school, whether I realize it or not, I use it all the time when I write and when I record and when I do all the music focused things. But at the end of the day, I do think that there is this kind of like, DIY type nature to a lot of things nowadays. And it's like, part of it is like just that hands-on learning and doing it, like, I don't know. I always kind of think back to like, every couple of days, like when I see my dad, he'll come up to me with his iPhone and he'll be like, how do I put a contact in my phone? Meanwhile, I've shown him how to do it like 30 times. And I'm like, I have to relearn how to do it every time because I don't use Apple stuff really. So like, it's just a matter of like, that's one skill. I kind of consider that like critical thinking, but some of it is also just kind of being exposed to it for long enough that you can kind of like figure stuff out on the fly a little bit. So I do think that there is a degree of like, being able to source out that information that you need to know and learn. And if you just apply yourself and spend the time and immerse yourself in the topics and read about it and whatnot, then, it'll become ingrained in you. That's essentially how I learned how to like produce music. I just go online and I find articles and YouTube videos and things like that. And I actually went through here. I know it's not going to show up on the podcast.
Video aid.
Yeah, video aid. But
describe it.
I have this Berklee College of Music binder.
With a parental advisory sticker slapped on the front.
That was an afterthought, but take that for what you will. And I actually went through and I had like a bunch of emails, and I would like from the newsletters for like certain, recording things and whatever. And I straight up like wrote down all these notes and just have them inside my binder here. Wow.
That is old school, but great.
Yeah. But it's all compiled into one place, and I don't have to, I don't know. I do think the older I get, the more old school I feel like I am. But it's just that simple sort of thing of like, I found all this information that I thought was useful and I wrote it down, and there it is. If I ever need anything, I can reference that, pull it out, and,
God, now that you mention that, this is a little off topic, but that's another frustrating thing that I hate about technology increasing at the pace it is. We can get information anywhere, but because there's so many channels for it and so many streams for it, it's up to us now to remember where we got that information. Yeah. Like I got an email reminder about a concert coming up this Saturday that I bought tickets to during the pandemic. So it got pushed back and finally it's happening again. I'm going through my emails and I realize I have tickets from Axis.com, I have tickets from Ticketweb.com, and I have tickets from Ticketmaster.com. And I'm like, I could not tell you with a gun to my head which one of those sites I bought the tickets from. So I'm having to search through my email, type in the name, and I'm like, this is just ridiculous. Let's just go back to libraries.
I know. I don't know. I was having that, kind of thought process to myself. Like I have it all the time. I'm just, we have, I still work at a pizzeria in the States, and I'm working on a Canadian job, I promise. But
Yeah, so customs officials don't come after you.
But it's just like, I need to find a proper career. I can't be working in pizza my whole life. But but we have some younger kids that work there, and this is maybe just more of a generational thing, but we have so many of them that have earpieces in while we're working, listening to podcasts or music or whatever. I finally talked to my boss and I'm like, you got to put up a sign or something like that says they can't have that on, because it's like, we're in the workplace. It just kind of looks unprofessional. Like, it'd be one thing if we were at like Tim Hortons or something and you need the headsets on, but I don't know. I think there's value in not being stimulated all the time, I feel. So I'm old school like that. I don't really
tell me about it.
The only time I ever listen to music, like some people, like, you assume that a musician listens to music all the time. I hardly ever do. And when I do,
really?
I listen to it in the car. That's it. I mitigate it to listening to it in the car. So like for example, like a few months ago, like Between the Buried and Me put out their new album, and I'm always hyped for a new Between the Buried and Me album. They're my favorite band,
Oh, I could tell that based on your music, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, but I buy their album. I pre-ordered it, but then like I didn't get a digital download or whatever, so I'm like, screw it, I'll buy it again. So I think I technically bought it twice, but I buy it and I'm like, I can't wait to be in the car to listen to that album. Like I didn't put it on immediately. I didn't start listening to it on my computer and then just sit there and listen. Like I only ever listen to music in the car usually. So it's like, I'm a weirdo, I guess. I don't know.
No, you're not. You're in good company, because even though I am definitely the need stimulation sort of thing, I'm becoming more aware of that too as I get older. I'm trying to be actively more aware of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, instead of just kind of mindlessly, being a creature of habit, like scrolling through my phone. But what you said about the singles thing is accurate. I'm an album person all the way. I think music is meant to be enjoyed in a certain place and time and frame of reference. Again, that's just my opinion. But I like that you're kind of honoring the artist's work by giving it the appropriate place and time to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, because in a car, like, especially now that I live in Canada, like my commute to work is like, I'm driving down a highway. So it's like, that's the perfect opportunity to just throw on an album that I just bought or whatever and listen to it, because I know some people too, I know it's crazy. It's interesting to see like the comeback of like vinyl records and all that, Yeah. I'm waiting for like the CD renaissance to come back, where people are like, oh, I want a CD player. But, I personally have never been a vinyl collector. That's just me. I think it's just my generation, but, I know some people are into it and some people really like it. And that's kind of like their thing, is to buy the vinyl, get the nice sound system, and like put the record on and listen to it in that respect. And I think that's a perfectly valid way to consume music. But for me, it's just, generally speaking, it's not something that I'll like actively sit down at home and do,
Yeah.
And especially like, I don't want to do like if I put on an album that I really like, I don't want it to become, the wallpaper when I'm like busy doing chores around the house or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's well said.
Like there's certainly some kinds of music that are perfect for that sort of thing. But like, if I'm listening to Between the Buried and Me, I'm listening to Between the Buried and Me. I'm not hearing it in the background. You know what I mean? Like I like to be engaged, I guess.
Yeah. That is a good place to ask you then. Being a musician, and particularly a music producer, when you listen to different types of stuff that you are actively engaging with, what are you listening for most? Like the quality, certain instruments? I'm just always curious how people kind of interact with music.
It honestly, like, it depends on how many times I've heard the thing, I think, more so than anything. So like, since we're on the topic of Between the Buried and Me, like if you're familiar with the Minolange, I'm sure you are. Their music is incredibly dense and very like hard to unpack. And typically what it is for me, like when I get an album like that, is I try to just get a handle on the arrangement first to understand what the song is doing, like understand like, where these riffs are, where they might repeat, what the chorus is, that sort of thing. I kind of approach it more from like the musicality aspect of it first. And kind of like subliminally or like sidecar to that, so to speak, is like the production and kind of hearing that stuff, because I obviously approach it from like, listening to it as a producer, mixer, so I it's usually like, the first few times it's certainly more for entertainment purposes to kind of understand, again, like to kind of hear what the songs sound like, to hear what they're doing. And then as I kind of start to get more and more comfortable with the music, you can kind of start to dig into those finer details of like, what's the guitar tone doing here? What's the vocal layering like here? And you can kind of pick up on those like smaller details because, there's a lot of things like that, especially in something like Between the Buried and Me. Like, I don't know if I've ever noticed it on their past records, but like, I don't know if you've heard the new one, Colors, too, but it's like the amount of vocal layering and the amount of vocal production is insane on that album. Like more so than I've ever heard. More. Yeah, more so than I've ever heard on their past albums. So it's like something like that to me is something that really stands out. And I'm like, shit, I really need to up my vocal production game when I get to mixing, because it's like, there's so much going on. So usually it's kind of like I said, I kind of, try to get the arrangement, in my head first to understand what the heck's happening. And then you can kind of get into those finer kind of points, like as you kind of get more comfortable hearing the music,
Mm-hmm. Well, this is why I always ask people on the pre-interview questionnaire to list your influences. And I hadn't read your form in a long time, but today as preparation, I listened to your 2018 album, actually twice, while I was out and about doing stuff. And I really did have this moment where I went, oh, I got to go back and check his form and see what his influences are. But I'm absolutely sure that Between the Buried and Me has to be on here. And I think when I first noticed it was the track Walk the Plank. There's just such weird, chunky dissonance and like the carnival, like weird pirate army stuff going on. But before I get into that, I do want to ask you some questions about that album. And obviously I'm talking about the Majestic Sailors, the Salty Sardine. That's how you kind of introduced me to your work.
Yes.
How did this album come into existence, and why did you write an album about this? Please give me the breakdown, because I love it, and I think everybody should listen to this album. It is so fun, and whatever. I'm going to stop fangirling. I love it.
I appreciate that. It's the most glowing review I think I've ever had of that album. I have made a couple of videos actually outlining the history of the album a little bit.
Okay.
This is me plugging my own YouTube channel, TB Audio on YouTube. But there you go. But yeah, the story behind the album is kind of like, I don't know, it's a weird one. So the album kind of was initially conceived back in like 2010, around there, somewhere in there.
Oh, okay.
And basically what ended up happening was this is going to sound like a weird story the way it starts out, but trust me, it'll like come together. So 2010 was the year that I graduated high school. It was my senior year, and as any good senior high schooler does, they go to their senior prom at the end of the year. So my school, for some reason, I don't ever remember them having this kind of money, but they rented a giant yacht for our prom to be on. That would go up and down the St. Clair River, So, we go to the prom, it's on the yacht, whatever, we're up and down the river. And then me and a couple of my buddies get up on the front of the ship, and then we get our picture taken by somebody else. And then later in the day or that week or whatever, we put the picture up on Facebook, everybody's commenting on it. And they're like, that's funny. It looks like a fake band album cover. And I'm like, all right. So I take the picture, I do a little bit of editing on it, and I got some, if you want, I can send you the pictures. So that way, if you want to put up a visual aid for your podcast, feel free. Okay. But I did some editing, got some like water around our ankles, so it looks like the ship is sinking. And somebody came up with the name, the Majestic Sailors, the Salty Sardine. Like that was the band name, that was the album name. And I'm like, all right. Okay. I'm like, let's take this joke further. Let's go ahead and make that album a thing,
You wrote a whole hour and 11-minute long album based on one photo.
Yeah. And this is already over 10 years ago that this album kind of was starting. We were starting to work on it. So, it was mostly a solo venture again, kind of on my part, but there was 4 people in the picture, the infamous picture of the unreleased Majestic Sailors album cover. Myself and my good friend Billy Waldron. He's the one that really kind of helped me initially, like in the early stages of the album, kind of like start to like make those songs, come into being. And Billy would be the first to admit he's not a musician. I kind of forced him into playing bass for a little while, but he hasn't touched a bass in like years now. So like at first he mostly kind of helped with like arranging for those earlier songs and then a couple of lyrical ideas here and there. But it was predominantly just me writing all the music. And then, we would kind of come up with like some ideas here or there together. Initially it was supposed to be a comedy album. We wanted it to be a comedy album. And obviously if you listen through the album, some of that has still stuck in there, but
there's some laugh out loud parts of this album, honestly. Like I find myself going, oh my God, really? Like,
yeah,
so good job.
So there's still some comedic elements to it, but if you can believe it, we went even more ham with like stupid lyrics and things in a previous version of some of the songs. Like the second song is called The Majestic Sailors, and we had some stupid ass lyrics. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but if I can find a draft, I'll send them. But they were dumb. So like the first like handful of songs, like I want to say the first like 5, maybe even 6 songs on the album, with the exception of the Twirl Wind, that one kind of came a little bit later. But like the first few songs, we hammered those out in like a couple weeks. Like we wrote them.
Wow.
They were done.
Wow.
And then, and like certain songs too, like The Dream, the opening track, that was like leftover material. Actually, I actually went to summer of 2010, like after my high school graduation, I did go to the Berklee College of Music in Boston for their summer program. And that was, we were learning about, I think like major scales and modes and stuff like that or something. I forget what it was exactly, but one of the assignments was just to come up with like a diatonic chord progression. And that's what that song was. It was just like this exercise in E major of like, here's these chords that are all in E major. And I'm just like, this could be a song. Let's use that. So then that's the first song. And then I kind of put like, the rock tag at the end of it. But I mean, other than that, it's like the chord progression is basically just what spawned that song,
Interesting.
But yeah, the first like few songs came together very quickly. And then following that, like, I think kind of as time went on more and more, I'm like, maybe, because initially they were joke songs, they were comedy songs, right? So I was kind of like, without even really thinking about it, I'm writing these kind of like real basic, like structured songs where it's like, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus out type things, which there's nothing wrong with those types of songs. But like, that's kind of what I was doing. Cause I'm like, why do I need to take the music so seriously if it's a joke album,
Yep.
And then kind of once I hit a certain point, I'm like, you know what, maybe I should actually try and write some cool stuff, So I think where I really started to try to write some like, kind of more like what I was into at the time. I was probably listening to Dream Theater every day back then. I don't remember, but like, I'm like, let's come up with some stuff like that. So you can definitely hear, I feel like a change in tonality once you hit Wallace the Walrus and then to the last 2 songs. Like that was where I was more like, all right, let's like, I'm going to put some effort into these ones and like kind of make them more, developed, a little bit more off the beaten path type things, and you can probably tell because the last 3 songs account for half the album's length, I think, or something like that.
I have the screenshot from Spotify, and I'm kind of like walking back through what I remember from each of the songs as you talk, and that does make perfect sense because track number 5, Party in the Port of Pearl Hacker, like that's a straight up mix of electronica, disco, funk, and like people screaming in the background. Like I think you made a distinct turn in tone after that, and then the very next track I remember going, wow, this album really does have everything. Like the Twirl Wind is like this, that's the Between the Buried and Me, like just strange, unconventional, emotive, dissonant twists. And I think you like capture the destruction and the the doom of what's happening to the crew of the ship. Like, I don't know. I never would have believed you had you not just said that you basically wrote this thing straight through, and that you're like, I only started giving a shit halfway through.
Yeah, no. Well, the Twirl Wind came later. Yeah, the first few songs were pretty like, they were pretty quick, which is crazy to me looking back on it, because now I take forever to write a song. Like, it takes me like months upon months upon months to finish writing one song. Like, and half of that is, I think, is just because life gets in the way sometimes. But it's just like I've become increasingly more and more picky about what I want the songs to do and everything. Mm-hmm. But, for the Majestic Sailors album, it was certainly more of like, we've got this funny idea, let's just roll with it. And like, whatever happens is what happens, So like, I think when you look at the track listing, those first 5 tracks, you can kind of see, like, at least I can see it anyway, where like my buddy Billy was the one that was kind of helping me like form those songs to happen. And then track 6, the Twirl Wind, is an instrumental song. He had like no input in that one, because I'm like, I'll write that one later, Mm-hmm. So I ended up writing it kind of more on my own by that point. And then I think he might have helped a little bit with Cyan Shades, but then like toward the end of the album, like it was kind of just me writing everything, And like I think after we had those first like handful of tracks like kind of written and hashed out, like the writing kind of did like slow to a crawl, because that was kind of where I think I started college, I think in the winter of 2010. So kind of doing all that, and then like, just life kind of gets in the way of that sort of stuff. You got to put priorities like where they should be. And the one thing I do remember though is like, I think I forget, it must have been 2012. So the rest of the songs weren't finished writing, like they weren't fully written until 2012, I want to say. And I remember being on vacation. My grandma used to live down in Florida for like half the year, so she was kind of like one of the snowbirds, where she's down there for the winter, and then she comes back up to Michigan in the summertime. So I think one winter we went down there to visit her, and I remember bringing a guitar, I think my 7-string, it had to have been my 7-string. And then I brought my computer, and I'm like, on certain days when I was bored and didn't want to do anything, I would be writing music. And pretty much the whole song of Transcend, the final track, the 16.5-minute long track, I wrote almost that entire thing like in like the span of like 2 weeks while I was down in Florida with my grandma. Yeah, just like a little bit every day I'd write some stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like I looking back on that song, I think it's a little bit of a Frankenstein kind of mess, because it's like there's just idea after idea after idea after idea, but I'm still pretty proud of what I was able to like put together with that, because I just came up with a lot of that stuff on the fly. And like, there were a few ideas that I kind of had sitting separately, and I'm like, oh, that would work here. So like, I just drop it in there. But it's like, I kind of just came up with that like sequentially, just like wrote it through for, I came up with it in about 2 weeks or so. I don't know, somewhere in there.
I know I ask this question a lot now that I've been on both ends of it, but I mean, what is your writing process like, and how do you kind of discipline yourself to call a song done, or to know when it has reached the vision you have for it?
I feel like I'm still trying to figure out what my writing process is, because I feel like it just changes all the time. But I think I've tried to like refine it a little bit more and more as time has gone on. I try to sometimes have like a big picture in mind for something, and typically, at least more recently, that's kind of come in the form of albums more so than individual songs, So like I am working on another full-length album currently, and it's been in the works for probably about as long as I'd worked on the Majestic Sailors album, And unfortunately, the Majestic Sailors album was just put off so much just because of school. Like, like I was saying, like, it had its roots in 2010, and then it doesn't come out until 2018. And it's like, this next album that I'm working on is kind of similar in that respect, because I'm working on another full length, and it's supposed to be a gapless album, kind of like Colors or Colors 2 or like any of that Between the Buried and Me type stuff, So, and I'm pretty sure the earliest material on this new album was, I think, first written in like 2014, or maybe even during like the Majestic Sailors, like when it was being written, I think. So maybe even 2012.
So you've been sitting on this for quite a while too.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is I didn't finish writing it till like this time last year. So like it just take a long time. Like there was a good chunk there where I got to like the middle of the album, and I was pretty content with everything that I'd written, and I just didn't touch it again for like several months. I don't know what happened. It's like one of those things where it's like you're working on it and you're like feverishly doing it, and then I got a headache today, I'll take a break, I'll come back to it tomorrow, and then 6 months have gone by.
6 months go by.
Yeah, and you're like, So that's kind of what this new album has been like. I've just been kind of slowly toiling at it for a few years, not like constantly, because again, it's like college is in there, job hunts are in there, moving to Canada is in there. There's just a lot of life things that happen. But throughout all of it, I do think that I've kind of tried to re-examine my own writing process. And again, like I kind of try to have some kind of big picture first. Again, I think more in albums than I do in songs, individual songs. So I'm kind of like, I'm starting to like write my next album too, like very, very, very slowly. But like, so just to clarify, like my next full length is written. It's pretty much all recorded except for vocals. So I'm kind of like working on the production side of things. On the side of that, I'm writing another full length. I'm trying to do another gapless album, and it's still kind of in its like early stages. Haven't really written much of it. I've got like maybe 4 minutes of material, something like that.
Can you drop with any certainty kind of what the themes are of both, or?
Yeah. So, okay.
I'm assuming not maritime, unless it's Majestic Sailors Part 2. Okay.
I have tossed around the idea of doing a Majestic Sailors Part 2, but there is nothing in the works for that currently, because I've had these other album ideas for many years, and I just kind of want to like do what I've had in my head, like at the time, like as I kind of came up with them. But the 2 albums in question that I'm working on currently, so the one that's in its production stages, again, both of them are concept albums, because of course they are. Why wouldn't they be? Now, and I don't consider myself to be like much of an anime fan. I'm not really, but there's a handful of them that I like quite a bit. There's this one from 2003 called Last Exile. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
Not familiar.
It's like this steampunk kind of like aviation focused thing, like where there's like, sky ships and stuff, that sort of thing. And it's basically just the story of that put to music, more or less, So,
that is awesome.
And then in the same kind of like breath, the next album that I'm writing, there's a video game series that I absolutely adore called Metroid. And I don't know if you've heard Metroid.
Like Metroid Prime, like
Metroid Prime.
Metroid.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And there was a manga released, I don't even know what year it was, but again, I'm not a crazy manga fan, but I just happened to read it one time, and it's the story before like the first game. In the first game, like was an original Nintendo game from like 1986 or something. So it's like to kind of have the backstory like before that. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like I kind of want to write music about that. Gives me a chance to do something a little bit like different. Like I'm kind of envisioning that album to be a little bit darker, a little bit more focused on guitar. And like, I usually use I don't use a ton of synth stuff nowadays. I've kind of tried to phase it out a little bit, but like to kind of like be able to focus more on like atmosphere and things like that, like, to kind of approach it from a different like standpoint musically. So that's kind of what I've got conceived so far. And I do have, I've got another album in like that I plan on doing after that, which is like an original concept that I came up with. It's a very basic concept. It's kind of just like, I don't know. Like these two people meet by happenstance and then they're separated for many years. And then it's just kind of the story about like their own journeys personally until they just come back together at the end, There's a lot of fine details in it. I can't remember what off the top of my head, but like it's kind of got like, this journey of two people separately, and then they come together,
Does that perhaps have anything to do with the fact that you and your wife were,
No, you would think that. That's a good connection to make, but no, that idea was conceived before that happened. So like this concept about the two people being separated, I came up with that way before me and my wife were separated due to the border closure between the U.S. and Canada. So I hadn't, it is kind of like certain things I feel, like one of the characters, like, the two characters in question, like one of them's male, one of them's female. And I kind of feel like I sort of take the place of the male character, in certain respects, but like I think I was just more kind of, into the idea of like, these two people meet, and then over many years of being apart from each other, they still have that memory of meeting. So like that kind of draws them back to each other,
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to marry the ideas you come up with on your own with music, or is that maybe why you want to branch off into, I don't know what the musical word equivalent would be of fan fiction, but you're doing a musical homage to an existing piece of work. Is that a challenge?
It can be, certainly, because it's like, obviously there's a narrative being told with this pre-existing work, and trying to find musical motives and things that like kind of match the point in the story is, certainly the challenge there. But I think that's what I find appealing about it, is the fact that it's like the way that I've always, likened it to is like, you're putting together a puzzle, but you get to make all the pieces to the puzzle,
Yeah.
So it's like, and I think that's just kind of it though, is like, I see some of this stuff and I just kind of draw inspiration from it. And I'm like, like what would, the rock opera to Last Exile sound like, and I'm just like, let's make that happen, So this next album that I'm working on, the one that's kind of in the production phases, is, it's not as goofy as the Majestic Sailors material is. There's one song that kind of touches on that a little bit. It's a little bit Zappa-esque sort of, but that's as far as like kind of into that realm that it goes. So it's kind of like, more of an honest attempt for me to make like a cohesive, big piece of music that seemingly makes sense, even though if you really look at the background of how it was all made, it was very much a patchwork sort of thing, kind of like the Majestic Sailors after a point, so maybe right. That's just my trend.
I think the Majestic Sailors album, though, honestly, like it did sound like a very cohesive work. And there was one thing I wanted to mention just before it left my brain, but I can see behind you, you have video games over there. We've talked about video games. Have you played the Ratchet and Clank series by chance?
I've played, I think, and completed every single one of them multiple times.
Basically my favorite game series too. That one of them, to me, there's the same amount of like switch between serious story and just goofy bullshit going on from the Ratchet and Clank games in that album. And like, I realized there's not a lot of bands out there that do that. I mean, you have like your Towhider, Necrogoblicon, Moron Police, those types of weird is our thing, goofy is our thing. But I feel like a lot of times it comes off very trite. And to be able to kind of interplay weird and wacky when it's needed, but tone it down, I think is like a whole nother skill that you just have to probably mess around with until you get it right.
Mm-hmm. And I honestly, like, if you've kind of gathered it, like the Majestic Sailors album was like my first like real attempt at an album. So like I kind of was just making it up as I went, but if it, I'm glad that you feel that it's cohesive, because I think, initially when we first planned it, we wanted it to be like a different genre every song. And yet, even despite that, I do feel like after having, because I sometimes will revisit it and listen to it myself, and I'm like, there is this strange cohesiveness to it, despite it being so like disparaging, where you've got this weird funk disco electro song immediately followed by a death metal song, and then after that, there's like this acoustic song with like this country twang guitar in it. And it's like, it somehow all coalesces into like the story,
tell me Colors is your favorite BT Bam album without telling me Colors is your favorite BT Bam album.
It's funny. Okay, side note for 1 second. I have, being in Canada, I still have to wear a mask pretty much everywhere I go. And I have a BT Bam Colors mask that I wear.
Amazing.
And it's so funny. Since moving to Canada, I think there have been like 4 different people that have recognized the mask and have been like, oh, Between the Buried and Me, heck yeah. And meanwhile, in the States, not one person has said that to me.
I will say, I don't know exactly where you are in Canada. I believe you're in Ontario somewhere. But, if you're within probably 30 kilometers of Toronto, that doesn't surprise me because I've gone up to Toronto for prog shows, and man, they freaking love their prog up there.
I dragged my wife up there one time for a BT Bam show. So yeah, like I've only been there twice, but yeah, it's a hike from where I'm at. But like, yeah, it's, I can only imagine like that's usually like a big stop, I feel, for a lot of bands that are coming through Canada. So
yeah. And I know I've discussed this on my podcast before too, but like, the Canadian hospitality is very real to me as just a visitor. So hopefully you're going through it as now a new citizen. Have you had any like Canadians like drop off like care packages at your house? Like, here's your bagged milk and a thing of poutine and like maple candy or
not quite. No. I've been with my wife. We just got married last January, but I've been with her since 2016. So I've kind of gotten accustomed to a lot of the Canadian isms, here or there. So there hasn't been so much of that, but I mean, they've having been around her and her family, they kind of broke me in, I think, a while ago. So
good. Well, I was happy to hear that, your move and everything went well, and I'm sure you still have a lot of adjusting to do, but that's good that you're, actually with your wife and you're getting to settle in. So I have a couple kind of last questions for you. Aside from, I guess, writing like 3 albums, what are the takeaways you want people to get from your music, and what are some of your goals for the future?
Takeaways. I don't know. I think my goal with every piece of music that I try to write is I try to create something that is in its own right, unique and original to some degree. So my thing has always been like, and I think with certain things it's just unavoidable, but like, there are certain times where like you listen to an album or you listen to an artist and every song kind of sounds the same or similar. And that's just something that I try to actively, avoid and kind of try to make each song have its own identity sort of. So I hope that people can kind of at least recognize like, some of that meticulous kind of like, tinkering that I do with the music to kind of make it more, each song kind of stand on its own more so than like, here's my style and I only do that style type thing, and I don't know. I just would like to be able to have, if people like it and listen to it, that's all I can really ask for really is just, if you like it, enjoy it and listen to it and engage with me. And if you want me to mix your stuff, send me some money and I'll do it for you.
Yes. No paying Taylor in experience.
Yeah.
Trading your experience bucks.
Oh, I've done the intern thing before and it's not that fun. So.
Yeah. This is my call to all my listeners to raise him up from having to work at a pizzeria the rest of his life, please.
Yeah, right. Please.
Go buy his album. I've been throwing this one in lately, taken from a fellow podcaster friend of mine, but if you could sit down with any artist alive or dead and ask them some questions, who would you choose and what would you ask?
Man. I mean, the obvious answer would be like Between the Buried and Me, but I did actually meet them once at a VIP thing. So I'm like, those guys kind of, are just doing their thing, kind of living their life. And I think that they're, I mean, heck, I think Paul's got his own coffee brewing thing now. So like he's kind of doing his own ventures and whatnot. But like, I think I always thought that one guy that just, like I mentioned him earlier, but I don't think that he gets enough credit, at least nowadays anyway, is Frank Zappa. Like he's just like such a visionary and such a unique personality, and he knew what he was doing. And I think, to have a sit down conversation with him would be he'd probably be pretty
difficult.
biting. It'd be difficult to talk with him, but it would be interesting to pick his brain, just to kind of get his viewpoints on things. Because that guy he was very opinionated, but very well spoken, Yes. And he's just like such an eccentric person, yet so level-headed and grounded in what he was doing and who he was as a person and as a musician and as a artist, So I think, some people at my workplace, so they tease me and ask me who my guitar hero is, and I'm always like Frank Zappa. He's like one of the most underrated guitar players in my opinion. So it's just, he's and I say that, and I've only ever scratched the surface of his music, but everything I've heard, I'm like, I love it, So it's, I think he would be fun to kind of have a one-on-one with.
I think, I'm not a huge Zappa fan, but the little bit that I was kind of turned on to by people in my life, I just think the guy, if anything, you got to give him credit for authenticity, because he did not shy away from doing exactly what he wanted to do and break a lot of rules.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There is a question that I tend to ask earlier that I forgot because we got wrapped up in the album discussion in college and stuff, but kind of going back to what we said about the education system and preparation for music technology, what would you change, if anything, about kind of the current music industry or the ecosystem?
Oh man, how much time do you have? For me, it's like, I think this is just me being an old grumpy man at this point in my life. I'm not even 30 yet, but it's just like, I feel like an old curmudgeon, but it's just like, and we've heard about it a thousand times, but like kind of like the way in which the music industry has gone like more towards like streaming platforms and things like that. Again, I think it falls more on me. I'm not really a fan of that style. I understand the appeal of it, obviously, because you can have any song at your fingertips. But I think just where that falls apart is just where like the royalties come in for the artists, I'm sure you've seen that like picture float around where it's like, Peter Frampton has like 15 million streams on one song on Spotify or something. And he only got like, I don't know, like $2,500 or something like that. Something ridiculously low. I might have gotten the numbers wrong, but it's something crazy like that, And it's just like, here's this guy who like wrote the song and like performed it and all that stuff and has performed it on stage, like, how many hundreds of times. And it's like, to get just that piddly amount of money for that, I understand that there's labels and all that stuff involved, but it's like, I don't know. I just think that there's something inherently wrong with how much society values music and how underpaid its artists are for it. It's just, nobody can make a living doing it. That's why I got to work at a pizzeria. That's why I got to work at the post office, is because I can't make a living making music. And, not that every single piece of music that you're going to make has to be a commercial, product necessarily, but it's just like, it's just kind of tough for like anybody who's kind of in music, heck, even audio work, to just find solid, good paying gigs that, you can support yourself with. So, I mean, I think just fundamentally, it's just, it's not an artist's industry. It's, industry for itself, like for its own sake more than anything. And I just think that that's kind of, I'm not a fan.
Yeah. I think that is probably why you see a lot of people who are music technologically inclined. They probably go into the jobs like you used to have, like doing voiceover work or whatever, because they know the mechanical fundamentals of how to set up a studio and how to mic things properly and mix it. But like, they don't have to do the creative work so much. They don't have to originate it. They can just help other people bring their vision to life.
Oh yeah. And there's certainly a market for that type of skill set. Absolutely. But, I think again, I still think that, there just needs to be more of a support system for the creatives as well, because it's not just music, but it's for, any other medium,
Yeah. This just ran across my mind because I have interviewed some Canadian musicians before. I think it was the guys from the Vancouver-based band Glass Kites I talked to that told me about how Canada in particular is like way more progressive when it comes to artist royalties.
CanCon.
Right?
CanCon is what you're talking about. Yeah. They have a, I'm not the most well-versed in it. I'm just an American faking to be Canadian. So don't take my word for gospel, but what they do have in place is they do have a law in Canada that requires a certain percentage of a radio program's content to be from Canadian artists.
That's right. That's what it was.
So if you listen to radio stations that are broadcasted in Canada, a lot of the musicians and a lot of the artists that are featured on there are Canadian. So of course, you get like Bryan Adams, Tragically Hip, Bare Naked Ladies, all these other bands that are Canadian, they're all being played on the radio because by law they have to. And I think that's at least a step in the right direction for supporting, the people that, you're featuring on the radio day in and day out. It's like these people are getting royalties, but it's at least I feel like just the simple act of doing that shows that at least, Canada at large values its artists. They're proudly displaying the Canadian flag whenever you hear Tragically Hip on the radio, So
yeah, I don't listen to terrestrial radio. The only time I hear it is if I'm driving somewhere with my boyfriend and he has it on in his truck. And it just hit me that in the last 2 weeks, 3 separate times I've heard the same song by Glass Animals on the same radio station, in 2 weeks. And I just thought, man, that's no wonder why people are ditching radio, because, you do get the choice. You do get the choice with streaming, but artists don't get the royalties, versus, at least here in America, you don't get choice, but you're supposedly exposed to new and exciting regional artists, except you're totally not. I've heard the same freaking song by Glass Animals 3 times. So is it really benefiting anybody?
No, I think it's just the way of the times. It's just that the radio has kind of lost its appeal to the newer generation. Just I don't know, maybe this is just me and my wife, but cable television is the same way. We don't have cable in our apartment and we don't care.
Yep, I don't either.
So it's I just think that certain industries like that, it's they're kind of starting to experience a little bit of at least with film and television, they're kind of experiencing a little bit of what the music industry has been going through for the last, however many years, ever since CDs and pirating and all that kind of became, the forefront of how people get their music. It's now all of a sudden people are doing that with TV shows and movies and things. And it's I don't know. Again, that's me just wanting to go back to VHS tapes and CDs and cassettes and all the stuff of yesteryear.
Hey, boomer is an identity. You don't have to be 61 to be a boomer. You can be a boomer at heart.
To be fair, I don't miss CDs and stuff like that, but I'm just saying, I don't know. Because even when I buy a CD, I just rip it to my computer and put it on a device. So it's no different than me just downloading it.
Right. Yeah, and there are obviously other downsides to CDs. Spotify doesn't skip, that sort of thing. But I know what you mean. No,
you
that does make a lot of sense.
Walk around outside and not have that skip happen.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Are there any other things you want to bring up before we wind this down?
But yeah, I got new music in the works, obviously, coming out. I haven't really been working on anything recently. I've just been settling into Canada, so I haven't really been working on anything in particular. But I'm hoping to get back into that pretty soon. The other thing is kind of a side part of my business as well that I mentioned earlier. Yes, I do the mixing and the mastering and all that stuff, but something that I've tried to incorporate a little bit, or I want to try and advertise a little bit more, is guitar lessons and things.
Okay.
I used to teach it to family-run music stores near where I lived in Michigan, and I taught for 4 or 5 years, something like that. I don't know. It was a little while that I taught guitar. So if you want to learn guitar music and things, primarily, I love teaching music theory and stuff like that, because I'm an advocate for when I would teach, I would always get the little kids that want to learn how to play, a Green Day song or something like that. But I'm always let's learn how to read sheet music, and let's learn how to play the notes on the guitar and know where they're at. Cause then it's if you give them the fundamentals, they can teach themselves how to play that Green Day song. I just never liked the idea of people paying for a lesson for me to teach them how to play a song that you can find the tabs for on Ultimate Guitar, So, I just, if anybody's interested in that sort of thing, hit me up and I'll do a Skype lesson with you. I'll teach you some boring music theory and things.
Good. Seriously, it's Operation Quit Working at Pizzeria time. So
yeah,
I'll make sure I link to every one of your ventures once the episode is out. But
absolutely. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, I guess that leads me to my last question, Taylor, and that is always, if you could only listen to 3 albums for life, what would they be?
Oh, all right. This might come as a surprise, but I'm going to pick The Great Misdirect by Between the Buried and Me.
Oh,
not
okay. Not Colors.
Great Misdirect. Colors got me into them, but Great Misdirect has grown on me. I think that's probably, in my opinion, their best album. With maybe a very close second to Parallax 2. I don't know. It's kind of, you ask a different BT Bam fan, you're going to get a different answer every time.
Yes.
So that, and then I'm going to pick Sound Awake by Carnival. I don't know if you're familiar with that album.
Love that album.
So good.
And then immediately make songs from that pop into my head at any point in time. Memorable.
And if I'm going to pick one, no, I'll try and pick one non-prog album. There's this little known, I shouldn't even say little known, they don't exist to anybody except for me, apparently. There's this band, I think they only cut 2 albums before they broke up, but there's this band from the early 2000s called Scapegoat Wax, and they did an album called Swax. I think it was in 2002.
Swax.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like a R&B, hip hop, funk type album. And it's one of the most underrated gems of all time, in my opinion. Every song on there is a banger. And it's just nobody's ever heard of it. The only other person that I know that listens to that album is my mom. And that's because I told her about it. So if you've never heard it before, I highly recommend checking it out because it's from a band that nobody has ever heard of. And it's a great album front to back, cover to cover. It's fantastic.
I just pulled it up on, maybe this explains it, not Google, but Bing, as you were describing it, because I had never heard of this. And I'm just going to read the first 3 sentences I see. Scapegoat Wax was prepped to cause the same stir that label mates Luscious Jackson had inspired in the early 90s when suddenly Grand Royal went under. Now signed to Hollywood, the band gets their second chance to make an impression on Swax. Bouncy beats, sensual bass lines, sexy acoustic guitar work, and the occasional synth line add up to a steamy pop album that knows how to keep things moving. I had to click on one more page. Okay, that sounds kind of freaking awesome.
It's fantastic.
Have never heard of that. I mean, what? Okay.
The only reason I ever heard of that band anyway is I think their hit single from that song is called Aisle 10, I think, or Hello Alice on Aisle 10 or something. And it was featured on a video game back in the day on the original Xbox called Jet Set Radio Future. And it was a rollerblading game. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a song on that game. And I remember every time that song came out, I'm like, hell yes, this song is great. And then eventually I looked up the rest of the album and it just turns out every song is just as good as that song.
To circle back to the Prague Discord, I just had a conversation with someone in there the other day about how I didn't know the band Alice in Chains until I played ATV Off-Road Fury for PS2 because Bones was on the soundtrack. And I'm like, how could I not know Alice in Chains as a child of the 90s, but then it takes some stupid game about riding ATVs up sand dunes to make me introduced to that band and Seven Dust and Drowning Pool and all these other great bands.
That's where I first heard Spoon Man was on that game.
Yes. Exactly. See, there is value. That is the value of putting originals on video game soundtracks. Oh, I'm so vindicated. Someone else learned Spoon Man from that OST. Yeah. Holy crap. Wow.
I used to play that game all the time.
Oh, I love going over to my neighbor's house to play that game. Holy crap. Yeah. Wow. I have to go play that now. I don't even have a PS2, but I will find a way. So, well, thank you, Taylor, for finally getting this little cross-country interview in place. And glad you're all moved in. And yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever you put out next. So
thank you very much. I appreciate it for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Taylor Batory. He is pretty easy to track down online, but I am going to read off those links just in case you need to know where to find his stuff. He is on Spotify and streaming platforms under TB Project. And then all of his stuff is on Bandcamp, including the little single tracks and the Space-like album, which you're hearing underneath my voiceover right now. That is at his Bandcamp, which is under TB Audio MI, formerly as in Michigan, tbaudiomi.bandcamp.com. Please help him go get some more clients, work on some more albums so he doesn't have to keep working at the pizza shop, okay? And as always, thanks for listening.